Okay, right, please give a warm welcome to our next guest, Linsay Rousseau. Thanks, Linsay. Take a seat. So, welcome to TF Nation. This is your first Transformers convention, I understand.
Well, technically second.
Oh, second, sorry.
I did do TFCon in Burbank in Los Angeles a couple months ago, and that's actually where I met the lovely people who invited me here. I'm so happy to be here.
Perfect, perfect. So, can we start with a little bit of background about yourself? Where you come from and how you got into acting, I guess. And how long we got? However long you'd like to take.
I'm going to have to do the Cliff Notes version, and we're going to be here all night. And I know we've got a cosplay contest, so. I grew up, I moved all over the country growing up, but I'd always done acting, I'd always done music since a wee age. But I also, stuck to my academics and everything, and went to college, and continued to do music and theater in college, but I also studied sociology and cultural anthropology. And then when I graduated, I ended up joining the U.S. Army and went, to training for that. And then next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Iraq. So I was a combat photographer with the 101st Airborne Division, and I spent a year deployment to Iraq from 2005 to 2006. So I came back, so that's that's something. But then I was medically discharged from the military, and like many of us who get out, didn't really know what to do with my life. But I've been doing journalism and photography, and so I decided to keep doing that. So I ended up going and getting my master's degree in journalism from the University of California, Berkeley. And I was an investigative reporter, I worked for PBS Frontline, I worked for ABC News, and then just the stress of being a reporter and working on these really serious stories and dealing with PTSD, I just had had enough, and it was taking its toll on my health. And I kind of, made the big decision that the one thing in life that truly brought me joy was when I was performing. And so I went back to theater. I'd done theater all growing up, so I went back to doing theater. And of course had to pay the bills, so I also became a certified teacher. So I was teaching school during the day, and then I was doing theater rehearsals at night, and then on the weekends I'd be teaching singing lessons, and so just all the things to pay the bills. And did that for about 6 years in the San Francisco area, and then was like, man, there's got to be a better way to earn money than this, because theater is so time-consuming and doesn't pay very well, even though it's my love. And I was lucky, I ended up in a theater troupe, and the woman who founded it, her husband was a sound designer for video games. And so I talked to him, and was like, I've always been interested in this voiceover thing. At the time I was playing through Mass Effect, and as Femme Chef, which is the only character you should play as in Mass Effect. And I was blown away by Jennifer Hale's performance in that show. If you don't know who Jennifer Hale is, she holds the Guinness World Record for most video game performances by a female actor. And so I was talking to him about that, and I was like, I've really been interested in this voiceover thing. And he's like, well, you know what, let me introduce you to the agent who I use for all my casting. So I met with him, and he's like, well, if you can get some demo reels put together, and I love your acting background, and get into some actual voiceover classes to learn the techniques and everything, he's like, I'll sign you. So this sound designer helped me put together my first demo reels, which, if I listen to them now, are so cringeworthy, and, got me signed with this agent, and then just started the grind that is acting and voiceover, and I was also doing some on-camera work. And just every year was kind of better than the next, or the previous year, and then eventually, after a couple of years, I made the decision that if I really wanted to take this to the next level, it was time to move to Los Angeles. So I moved to LA in 2016, and again, I was so broke when I moved there. I was working multiple jobs, doing granola bar samples at the grocery store, and kale chips, and what else did I do? Coconut water, and then a couple years, finally was at the point I was like, wow, I'm actually paying my bills as an actor. So I got to quit all the side jobs, but and you know, learning about the industry, because I know animation and video games seem really glamorous, but to really, you know, make a living doing it, you have to be so diversified. So much of the work I do is commercials and narration and on-hold messages for for phones, and you know, and then I got into dubbing, and I do a lot of foreign live-action dubbing and then motion capture, and I still do some on-camera work, but you can do, you know, five times as much voiceover work in a day as you can spending 12, 14 hours on set. With hair and makeup and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I get to roll out, you know, my bed and my PJs and go to my closet or go into studio and just be there for an hour or a couple hours. And so I've been really lucky, but, you know, it had some hard times, had some broke times, and, you know, now thankfully things have been going well, and yeah, I can't complain.
That's amazing. I mean, what, yeah, round of applause. Story. I mean, we're spoiled at TF Nation. We get some amazing voice actors every year. I think I'm probably not the only one. I'm thinking that's maybe the most unique. You know, you know, theatre and music and acting, and it's all just.
I've definitely had people come up to me and be like, "Are you 80? How have you done so much in your life? You can't be the age you are. How old do you think I am?"
Yeah, like, oh, my war years and then my journalism years, and
that's
amazing. Awesome. So can you tell us specifically regarding Transformers, how did you get that role?
Yeah, so just like everything in this industry, it was an audition. And so I do so many auditions, I don't even remember them after, you know, because you have to just, if you saw the panel yesterday, you have to just audition and move on. You can't dwell on things. But when the audition came around, it was actually code-named, which is very common in the industry for security reasons. All the names have been changed. I had no idea it was Transformers. It literally, the character was described as a soldier and a leader, and, you know, no indication whatsoever that this was a Transformers project. And of course, like all my other auditions, I auditioned for it and then forgot about it. And then 4 or 5 months later, I get a call, and they're like, "Hey, you have a call back for project XYZ." I was like, "Oh, okay, great." And so I did go into the studio for the callback, and when I walked in, that's when they're like, "Oh, by the way, this is for Transformers." And I was like, "Okay, I'm not gonna get nervous. It's just an audition. It's just a callback. You're already here." And so then they explained it was for Transformers. They further explained the character, and like so many of us, I wasn't very familiar with the Leda one because, you know, unless you are a diehard comic book fan, which I did once I got the role, go and read the comics to get more context about her. You know, she had like a very small role in G1, and so she was kind of a blank slate, which was nice. And the director, who's now one of my dear friends, we worked together, and he kind of got me where I needed to be, and they loved my military experience. And then, of course, I did the callback, and then hear nothing for a while. I don't even know how long it was. But then finally they said, "Hey, you've been cast." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing." You know, all of the sessions were by myself, so it was just me and the director, and I think one of the animators was there, one of the senior producers was there for the sessions, and you know, we did season 1, and then a couple months later came back for season 2, a couple months later came back for season 3. So, you know, there's a big time gap between when, you know, I think it was 1 or 2 years from the time that I recorded to when season 1 actually dropped. And of course, we had all these plans for publicity. We were going to have a big announcement at San Diego Comic-Con, and then we had a pandemic. And we went into lockdown, and Comic-Con was canceled, and season 1 dropped in July. And it was kind of like the little show that could, because, you know, there wasn't that much advertisement for it. But it did end up becoming one of the top, it was in the top 10 on Netflix, at least in the US, for several weeks, which was great. But yeah, that was kind of hard because, you know, we had all these plans, and then they kind of fell by the wayside. But it was really great to see the love that there's out there for Alita 1. I mean, she's a really special character, and the more I read into her and dove into the comics and learned about her story, I just fell in love with this character. Did feel like I had a lot that I could relate with her, and in my opinion, she taught Optimus everything he knows. And if they had only listened to her in War for Cybertron, I think a lot of bots' lives could have been saved. So that's that journey.
Amazing. So you said there from your first audition tape to getting the call back to actually starting the work, quite a long period of time. I'm curious, how did you manage to recreate that voice, particularly if you're doing so many different characters, sort of blind?
Yeah, I mean, so that's always the thing in this industry is when things are so spread out. But when I went in for the first session for season 1, the director and I worked together because I ended up pitching her down a little bit lower, and they added a lot of effects to it. But for the most part, she is very similar to who I am, not quite as animated, so I tone myself. And one thing they did actually have to do is, because of my combat experience, a lot of the fighting and efforts and stuff I had to do for her, they're like, can you pull that back a little bit? Because the other actors can't get to that level. And I was like, okay, great. So that was the one thing I had to pull me back on that. But yeah, when you go back in for season 2 or whatever, they play you the references for what play some reference from what you did for season 1. You take a little bit of time with the director to kind of get back in the zone, to get back with the character, and so but it's you do have a lot of these things in your head, and I have a video game I'm working on now that I've been in sessions for probably 2 years now. Just keep going back in. Every time I go back in, they're like, okay, here's the character, they play the reference. Okay, great. Now I got her. Okay, I had to bring her back, but I got her, so yeah.
Oh, that sounds really, really hard. And you said that all the recordings were just at the studio, just you, the director. How challenging is that? How did that affect kind of the
right? Well, I will show. Yeah, so I will say, there's really been a shift in the industry in the past 10 to 20 years. When Gary talks, he talks about all the group sessions that he's done. That's not the norm anymore. There's a few cartoons out there that still do group sessions, but for the most part, I've only ever done remote recording. I've been doing this full-time since 2013, and I've never done a group session in my life. With every video game I've done, animation, nothing. So that was not unusual for me. But again, having come from a theater background, of course, if you can have other people there, it's amazing. But that's where you really have to develop a good synergy with the director, because they're the ones that have all the context. It's like, yes, I'm able to see the script, and you have the other characters' lines there to feed off of, but you don't obviously have their energy and everything. So, it really is a partnership between you and the director because he knows exactly what sound he's going for. And, you do a couple takes and tweak it, and you finally get to the point where, okay, I think that's the pocket, that's where we need to be. But yeah, it would be really lovely to be able to do a group record. I would love to do that one day.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because if anyone was here in the previous panel, we were hearing about the rescue bots and how they'd done theirs as a group record. It was quite
right. Exactly.
Oh, it's very interesting.
Yeah, because I will say, when I had to do season 3, when Alita dies, and I was like, I was bawling.
Spoilers.
The director. Yeah.
Spoilers. You don't watch this.
It's been out 3 years now, so if you don't know, but she
has
part of the All-Spark, doesn't mean she's gone. But no, I was bawling, but I will say for a scene like that, it would have been really good to have the other actor to feed with, because then it was the director, really pushing me. But, for things like that, for really emotional things, it would be good to have someone else.
How does, off the back of that comment, how does it feel when, in this or in other shows or games, when your character dies? How do you
I know, when I got the script for season 3, obviously at the end of season 2, it's a mystery. What happens to Australia? Yeah, it's just like a big explosion. But if you don't see the body, you never know. But then when I read the end of season 2, I was like, okay. And then a couple months later, I got the script for season 3, and I was just like, no. And I called the director, and I was like, what is this? He's like, oh no, I'm sorry. He's like, but technically she's part of the All-Spark, which means she can always come back. It's Transformers, timey-wimey. We can figure it out. And I was like, okay. And if anyone saw any of the footage or was at the TF.Con in Los Angeles, F.J. DeSanto, who's the showrunner, did say that they actually had 4 more seasons planned, and Alita was supposed to come back and be the main character, and I was was devastated. So feel free to tweet at Hasbro and Netflix and ask for that Alita 1 spinoff with me.
We can start our campaign.
Disappointed. But no, so that was hard. But you know, and that's how this industry works. You know, there's finance people and producers, and they all make the decisions that you have no control over. But I cried. I cried a lot when she died. I really did, because I loved her. I fell in love with her.
As did we all. I think, yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned earlier that, you know, Alita 1's she's not in a lot really, even though, you know, you have to go back to the comics, and she's in, is it season 3, season 4 of G1? Like, she's on
Very,
yeah. It's just, there's just little snatcherings of her for such a, what could be such a key character.
Well, and I mean, and I will say, I like to think that because of the warm reception she received from War for Cybertron, that I think that's one of the reasons she is going to be an Earthspark. And one of my, and Cissy Jones, who is an amazing actor, and I absolutely love her, is going to be playing Alita 1 in that series. But it's obviously a kid's show, so very different feel. But I like to think that because they saw how well received Alita 1 was, that they included her in that show as well. So if I did nothing else, maybe I've gotten her, you know, into the mainstream, and we can see more female Transformers, because, you know, there hasn't been great representation. I mean, I'm sorry, I love RC, but it's like, there's more than just RC out there. Just more than I personally, if I had my way, I would have an Alita 1 spinoff that was the Alita Army, because in the comics, like, there is an Alita Army, and it's her commanding, and I hate the term fembot, because gosh darn it, they are bots. But I'm like, it's Alita commanding, you know, all these amazing other female Autobots, and I was like, that's the story I want to see. Because, you know, the brief time she had with Chromia and War for Cybertron, I was like, yeah, Chromia and Alita 1 just going to take all the, you know, all the Decepticons down. But that's what I would love to see, because, you know, when I was getting messages on social media, like, my 6-year-old daughter loves this, and I was able to watch this with my kids, and I was like, yay, female will love us. Because when I first had questions, you know, conversations with people about the show, you know, someone was like, well, who are you? I'm like, Alita 1. They're like, who's that? And I'm like, the female Transformer. And they're like, which one? And I was like, no, literally, the only female Transformer. And I had this conversation with the director, and I was like, why do we not have better female representation in Transformers? And he was like, well, it's a boys' show. And I was like, right? And I was like, I grew up with Transformers. You know, I'm like, it is not a boy, and I hate this. I talk about this all the time. If anyone's seen any of my previous interviews, I'm like, I hate gendered anything. I'm like, my brother played with My Little Ponies. I played with Transformers. Like, just stop it. We can love whatever we want to love. Like, stop trying to put us in boxes and categories. Just love the fandom.
Absolutely. I think we've seen, like, slow increase. We've got Windblade, we've got RC and more things, and we've got Alita 1. I think they're slowly, hopefully, getting the message. We can repeat that to the directors, you know.
We got 5 now,
so it's okay. That's great. So obviously in the shows, you know, there's a lot of character interaction with Alita, with obviously both Optimus, and then more in season 2 with Megatron. How did you decide how to act that, I guess, because there's some pretty, you know, there's a lot of raw emotion in, you know, maybe start with Optimus and then we'll lead to Megatron.
Well, and again, and that's where, like I said, having that synergy with the director is so important, because, you know, I get the script and I make my choices and my own interpretations, and then, you know, the director and the producers know how they want the show to go as well, and so, you know, tweaking and changing and stuff like that. But I remember when I got the script for season 2, and was like, whoa, there is so much here with Megatron. And then I was like, man, I would love a prequel series to see, you know, Ariel with Megatron in the mines, and like, where did these characters come from? Like, they obviously used to be friends, and now they're on polar opposites. But obviously, you know, and that was one of, you talk about, you know, how did I act it? That was one of the acting choices I had to make, was like, yes, Megatron has done these horrendous things, and, you know, is contrary to everything I stand for in you know, leading the Autobots. But he also used to be a close friend of mine, and so now I'm faced with this situation where, know I need to stop him, but, he was a friend, and how hard is it to kill a friend, or an old friend, or even, even if you disagree with them now, so there was always that kind of in the back of my head. It's like, well, he's not just an evil character that I'm trying to defeat. It's like, no, he's become this evil character, but I still remember him from when we were in the mines together. So that made it, that gave that extra level of difficulty in how I, tried to combat him, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And it's just, when I re-watched it recently, obviously in preparation of this weekend, some of the scenes, there's a lot of chemistry there, there's a lot of really good, that's why I'm so surprised.
I never met him, the actor who played Megatron, until we did TF.Con in Burbank. And actually they were able to get most of the voice cast for War for Cybertron, and it was the first time any of us had ever met. Except I knew 2 people in the cast previously from other jobs, but it was the first time any of us had ever met. And we're like, oh my god, so good to meet you, so good to meet you. Oh my gosh,
I killed you. Oh,
I killed you. You killed me.
Sorry about that. Amazing, I love that. And then I guess, in terms of her interaction with Optimus, it's such a, they're so similar in a lot of ways, but they're also really different, and that's they argue a lot, they disagree a lot, particularly in season 1.
Yeah, and that was really important for me, because a lot of times the lead of one is described as Optimus's love interest, and I'm just like, ugh, way to reduce this amazing female character to Optimus's love interest. And so I was like, and I'm reading this script, and I'm like, and the director and I talked about this, and we're like, oh no. She taught Optimus everything he knows. And the times when she's, she's there to challenge him and question him, it's like, yes, he's the leader, but it's like, he made some stupid choices. And when she's like, hey, guess what? This is probably a trap. You know this is a trap, right? Right? This is a trap? And then he goes there, and it was a trap. Told ya. Oh, there was a GIF that's, I don't know if any of you saw it, but there's a GIF for a while. It's a leader rolling her eyes from the series. It's my favorite GIF ever. Because they actually had reference cams on us while we were recording for the animators to animate so they could see our facial expressions. And I got a text from my friend, and he's like, did you do mocap for this? And I was like, no, but they did have reference cams. He's like, you've totally given me that look like a dozen times. He's like, that was you. I was like, you can't tell me this.
That's amazing, that's amazing. So, I don't know, I rewatched it recently. It was really good to see, I don't know, we love Optimus, but it's nice when Optimus makes a mistake. I don't know, he's often just so perfect. This was the right thing.
This was early Optimus. This is Optimus before, he's been through so much. So yeah, he's not the leader and, the confident leader that so many iterations have shown him as. This is him when he's still learning how to be that leader. And he makes some really bad choices sometimes, he flees Cybertron and leaves the leader in charge, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, saw her slightly good at times Megatron and actually flawed Optimus. Yeah, makes for a change, definitely. I'm trying to remember my other questions well now. Do we want to open up to the floor? Has anyone got any burning questions? Justin, can I borrow your microphone skills, please? Oh my word, we've got loads. Right, we'll start across from this side, and hopefully this side will think of some questions. Go.
So you talked about sort of more modern voice acting. So to anyone who wants to, who has aspirations to become a voice actor, especially in this new digital age, do you have any advice?
Acting. Yeah. Voice acting is acting. Absolutely. It's get into acting classes first and foremost. Theater background's great, but get into acting classes. It's not about putting on funny voices. It's not about, all of the things that, I have a great voice, people tell me I should do voiceover. It's all acting, regardless if it's a commercial or medical narration or animation or video games. Those are all different genres that you have to learn how to perform within those genres. But it all comes back to the acting first. And then, things like you have to have a home studio in this day and age, and knowing how to navigate that, and knowing that it's a grind, and there's a difference between doing it as a hobby and doing it as a profession, and that, the days of being able to just do cartoons or video games are long gone. Those days don't exist anymore. You have to be able to do so many different types if you want to be able to make a living, you know. So I always say, like, I am privileged that I've been able to do lots of video games and now be able to do Transformers, but on my day-to-day, most of the work I do is commercials and narration, you know, because there's so many of them out there, they pay a lot better. So yeah, but absolutely get into acting classes first, and there's a lot of resources out there. D. Bradley Baker, who very, very famous voice actor, can make sounds I wish I could make. He has a website called iwannabeavoiceactor.com. Fabulous resource for anyone who's interested in getting into it.
Great,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next one there.
Go down the line.
Hello. I have two questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
I'll do as quickly as I can. First off, Alita's got so many like amazing moments in the show, like I said, putting Optimus in his place, or just kicking ass generally. What are some of your favourite moments from the show for Alita?
Oh.
And second question, you spoke also about like your combat experience. What elements from your experience did you take and put into Alita to kind of round her out?
Great questions. I will say there's two moments that I absolutely love. The first is when she's first introduced in episode 1, and Optimus, and I don't even remember who else was with him, they're walking in, and all of a sudden they get ambushed, and then all of a sudden, pew, pew, pew! And you're like, what? And the lead is sniping them, and you're just like, you're welcome, Optimus. You would have been dead, you're welcome. And then afterwards she's like, I told you it was a trap. So I love that. And then the other moment I loved was when Optimus is taking the Allspark off Cybertron, and he goes to get into the Ark, and he's like, Alita, come on, and she's like, no. Someone's got to stay here and defend Cybertron and the other Autobots, and then she raises her blaster and just starts mowing people down, and you see the Ark taking off, and Alita's just there shooting, and it's like, yeah, like she is so dedicated to her planet and to her people, and she's like, you do what you gotta do, but I'm gonna stay here, and I'm probably gonna die, but I am here to defend the other bots and my planet. And so that was another moment I absolutely loved. To your second question, yeah, I absolutely brought a lot of my combat experience, and that was actually one of the things, I know the show's gotten a lot of mixed reviews, but that was one of the things I really loved about the show, was that it was dark and gritty, and it didn't sugarcoat war. You know, it showed how brutal it is, and you know, when Alita and Optimus walk in to their hideout, and you see all the bots that are like leaking energon, and you know, and then you learn that, you know, I'm so bad with names, but what's his name had become a medic, but he previously never done anything like that. And it shows people, you know, just coming together to help defend each other, even though they have no background in fighting, but they're coming together to survive and help each other. And then, you know, the scene where you see the heads on the pipes. One of my wushu coach texted me, and he's like, I just showed this to my kids. You said this was a kid's show. And I was like, I absolutely did not say this was a kid's show. I said this was a show that some kids could enjoy. He's like, this is so dark. And I was like, I know. But having been in combat, I really appreciated that they didn't sugarcoat just how hard and exhausting, you know, war can be, and that people die and they don't survive, and you have to learn to move on, you know, when you've lost friends, and learn to come together. And so, and then things like knowing how to shout and die and all those things, and fighting efforts, you know, things that I brought into it. But, you know, that was always in the back of my head. And the director would sometimes poke me, like in certain scenes, be like, all right, Lindsay, I need you to go back to your time in Iraq. I need you to dig deep and pull that out for the scene. So, yeah.
Good question. Okay, can we get
Yeah, hi. You said you grew up with Transformers, so I'm just wondering, did you have any Transformers toys growing up? Which was your first, and what was your favourite show?
I did. So my parents were, those people that believed in educational toys and things like that. So every year for Christmas, we'd get a book, we'd get like a stuffed animal, gender-neutral stuffed animal. My mom was that person, she didn't let me play with dolls. And it was always really important to them that we have toys that we could, interact with and would help, engage our mind. So we would always get Transformers every year. And I think Optimus, I'm dating myself, this would have been in the 80s. I think Optimus was probably the first Transformer that I got. So that would have been, I guess, a G1 Optimus.
You have to be early parents.
Thank you. My mom came with me. She's not here right now, but she came with me, so I'm very happy. Yeah, so I think Optimus was my first one, and then every year, I can't even remember now, I finally had to get rid of all of them, because I moved so much. And then the first female Transformer I got, you all are going to hate me, she's a motorcycle.
Which one's on?
She was purple.
Film?
Oh, blue, maybe blue. I think it was, there it is, yeah. I have the worst, I'm so bad at names.
It's spiky.
Yes.
Spiky prime,
Yeah. So yeah, I did. I obviously was not as well versed in, and I watched the show when I was a kid, but I was not as well versed in the fandom as obviously all of you are until I did get the role of Alita and then really started diving into, her comics and everything.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, that's wonderful here.
So you mentioned you liked that it wasn't sort of telling the love story of being the girlfriend of Optimus Prime, but Transformers, through not having many female characters, hasn't really engaged in love stories and stuff, in the cartoons at least, but it has been more represented in the comics, and especially between different genders and everything like that. Do you think that's something they can do in Transformers?
You think they can have love stories in Transformers?
Yeah, like in the cartoons. Do you think that's something that Transformers can now start to put into the cartoons more?
I mean, why not? Now that you mention it, it's very interesting. There never really has, besides Alita being called Optimus's love interest, and perhaps that's because they're bots and not humans, that it hasn't really been, hasn't really been investigated. But one thing that, at least that I thought I saw in War for Cybertron, is that you really saw characters that cared about each other. In all the different ways in which you can care about another being. You had Alita and Optimus, and then you had, a lot of the other characters, and just, obviously love can be represented in so many different ways. Doesn't matter. Love is love is love is love. I think it would be interesting. I think because this was the first real adult Transformers, and because with kids shows, in general, they tend to not focus on love stories, so I think that might be a part of it, which is why it has been more represented in the comics than in the shows. But yeah, I think if they do another kind of more adult Transformers series, that's absolutely something that they could dive into, which again, our show was also unique in that there was no humans in it. And that was apparently a conversation that the studio and the producers had really early on. They were very, very hesitant to make a Transformers show that didn't have humans in it. And I personally was like, well, I don't really care about the human story. I want to see the Transformers story. I don't know what's going on with Cybertron. Like, Earth could just do whatever Earth's doing. And so I think that was another reason it was unique, that we did start to see some of these emotions because we weren't so focused on the human stories. So I do think if they do another kind of more adult series, they should absolutely dive into those, because that's what makes you fall in love with characters, right? Is the relationships that they have with each other, however that manifests. Like I mentioned earlier, I want to see Ariel and Megatron's relationship. Like, where was that back in the day? And see how that manifested. Great question.
Yeah. Okay, what do I do here? I've just got this headcanon now that like everyone, it's like, the bad boy X, and you're like, oh look what happened, they both went and niggered me, look, whoops. That's a complete headcanon. Got a question over here?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, this question is going off on a little bit of a tangent. Having
Hold it a little bit closer to your...
Sorry, better? Yeah, okay. Having played the Alita character and understood her personality, what would you imagine her doing during peacetime? If she weren't fighting or in the military or doing that sort of thing?
So, if Alita wasn't a soldier, what would she be doing?
Yeah,
I think it's during peacetime.
Yeah,
In
let's
what
say,
way?
Peacetime.
Oh, in
If
peacetime.
there weren't
Peacetime.
war on, yeah.
so if the war were over tomorrow, what would she actually do with her life after that?
Ooh, I honestly think she would probably be like a diplomat, right?
Yeah.
I see a lot, and I know this is cliche, but I see a lot of like Princess Leia in her, in that she can be a soldier and a warrior and a leader, but I also think she would be a great diplomat, and she would be, you know, the bot that represents Cybertron when they're negotiating with like other planets or something. I definitely could see her being in like, I don't know, the United Nations version of Transformers. I don't know what that would be, but that's what I would see her doing, because I do think, even though she obviously fought on the side of the Autobots, because of her past relationship with Megatron, I think she really didn't agree with it, but she really understood where he was coming from, right? That whole like good intention or bad situation, good intentions lead to bad outcomes or whatever it is. So I think she has the ability to be objective and see different viewpoints as opposed to just being very black and white, binary. So that's why I think she would be really good as a diplomat of some sort.
Nice, good answer. Okay, got one up front down here.
I apologise that I missed the beginning because I was actually getting through to my companions here, so you may have already answered this, but how difficult was it for you to get into the character of Alita? And did her character evolve as you got to know her?
That's a great question. I will say I was lucky with this show in that I was able to see a script in advance. It was only a couple days in advance, but it was in advance, which is very rare. Like, again, I do so much video game work where I literally show up and they've got a script on the screen and I just go through the lines, and I've never even seen the characters before until I walk in the room. So for this, I was able to see the script in advance, so I was able to kind of see where it was going, where it was coming from, and then again, doing my research as to who she was. But they also, the director was great. He was also very encouraging to have me bring myself to the character. But absolutely, I mean, Alita has a fantastic arc across, you know, the 2.5 series, you know, of War for Cybertron, and so absolutely we grew together, you know, from where she started out at the beginning to where she ended up. And of course, the longer I played her, the more attached I became to her. So yeah, but there was...
What meant when I talked about it, was it a case of that you had the character, you had a shallow understanding, but as you moved on, you put more depth into her character, and she evolved from what as you came to understand her more?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I can answer that, whether she got more depth as she moved on. I think she started off with a lot of depth.
That's very true.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, I think the thing that really jumped out at me that, you know, if I had known sooner might have been good was her relationship with Megatron, which I did not know about until season 2. So yeah, I think that's an instance where had I known that in season 1,
Now you've got me one.
I know, right? Maybe it would have changed things, but again, that's where the director and the producer are there, and they know what the big arc is, and so hopefully they had directed me to a place, even though I, the actor, did not have all that information at the
They
time.
wanted
Yeah,
a
fun.
3-part series with a certain set of episodes, and bringing that in might have had to change that. They couldn't get it all in.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
But you've got any
Shame.
more
That's a
questions?
big shame.
Got another question down here?
Thank you.
Hi Lindsay, fantastic job on your role of Alita, and obviously now that you have entered the franchise, hopefully we will be hearing more of you in the future. So, my question to you is a bit cliche, being an older fan and growing up with G1. you know, we literally only had one, technically 2 episodes with Alita, and obviously you were given your script, you were told the premise about the character, and then when you found out, you started to do your homework, you went to the comics. Did you go and check out the one and only episode of G1 with Alita in it? Like, obviously, yes, it was G1 to the Netflix series. Difference is night and day, but it's still, you know, for me, just it was what I knew, and then this Netflix series came along, and it was such an eye-opener, and I thought, this is incredible. So, did you
I did not, and I did that deliberately, because, like you said, the Netflix series was a much different tone than the G1 series, and I didn't want to have anyone else's voice in my head, because that was the nice thing about playing her, is that I essentially had a blank slate for the character. Right? And, you know, I wasn't Optimus, I wasn't Megatron, I didn't have decades of other people's iconic voices that I was having to live up to, which was really good for me. And they told me, they're like, make the character your own. So I specifically avoided, I know I'd seen it back in the day, but I specifically avoided watching any of her in G1, so I wouldn't even have, you know, an inkling of a voice in my head. And that's why I went to the source material, because then I was able to read about her without kind of getting someone else's interpretation in my head. But great question, thank you.
That makes sense. I've got another question at the moment, so we've got time. So just moving away from Transformers for a minute, and you talking with such passion about Alita, can you tell us another, maybe your favourite character you ever played from any video game franchise? I won't offend us, it doesn't have to see
well, Alita is definitely my favorite character.
Really? It's your favorite? Wow, good answer!
I'm not just saying that to pay for your No, and I had this conversation with quite a few people because, you know, so much of what I've done is video games where, you know, I'm what's called a utility player. Like, I'm not the leads, those tend to go to celebrities, so I'm called in to do the 3, 4, 10, 20 voices of additional characters, which is why I always joke, like, you probably don't know who I am, but you probably killed me. Because that's, you know, and that's great. I get to go in for many, many, many more sessions than the lead actors do, so I'm going to pay a little bit more. Unless you're a celebrity, in which case you get paid an obscene amount of money, way more than I do. So, you know, some of those characters have been like, you know, like for God of War Ragnarok, I have 2 characters that I'll be playing. Again, they're just utility characters, but I actually had to come up with really unique voices because they're very animalistic. So one's kind of this demon-y type character, and this other one's like this berserker owl character. So like, that was kind of fun, like figuring out the voices for those characters, but there's no like story or arc for them. It's like, come in, make these sounds, and you know, here's a few lines in old. Oh, that was the other thing. I had to speak Old Norse, so that was fun. We had reference files from someone who actually spoke Old Norse, so it's like, here's the line, here's the translation, here's the person speaking it, go. And again, I have never seen any of this before in my life, so I'm in the session having to do it. And then another game I recorded, I had to speak this alien language, which, you know, that was fun. But as far as like characters and acting, you know, Alita is really the first role I've had, you know, first big role I've had, even though I've been working in this industry for, you know, many, many years. And that's the thing about working voice actors is so many of us, you have no idea who we are, even though we're paying our bills, we're making a lot more money than most on-camera actors because we're able to do twice as much work, but until you get like that iconic role, right, which nowadays mostly goes to celebrities and influencers, it's like, we're just the working schmucks in the background, you know, we go in, we pay our bills, you know, we can go to Comic-Con and nobody knows who we are, so we can just walk around and not get mobbed. It's like, yeah, that's it. No one knows who I am, so I can walk through the streets and nobody bothers me. So that's why I say Alita was my favorite, because she was the first character where I actually got to dig into a character and a story arc and all of that, as opposed to just going in and doing, you know, these one-off NPCs, or, you know, even some of the NPCs I played. Like, I have a game coming out next year where, again, I've played these characters for 2 years now. But again, they're still NPCs, so it's like the whole thing is like I'm giving the player character their missions, and so they have kind of story arcs, but not like Transformers.
Yeah, Great, great answer. Okay, we've got just under 5 minutes. So we've got another two of us or another hand that came
we'll
up.
see.
Got one over here in the corner. And we can maybe take one, maybe two after that, and then we'll have to wrap up.
Hi. So just wanted to say, first things first, your voice of Alita, absolute definition for me.
Thank you.
Chef's kiss, it's fantastic.
I appreciate that.
No problem. But like, as you said, like, you didn't want to have like a specific voice of Alita stuck in your head before you prior to do her, but you said you read material for her and that. And it just made me curious. Were there any other characters that you read about or learned about throughout your journey of Transformers that you feel like deserve more limelight or spotlight?
Oh, Chromia. Absolutely Chromia. Yeah. Because, you know, we didn't get to see her in the series until, I think we briefly saw her in season 1, then we did get to see her quite a bit in season 2. And I was like, man, she didn't say much, but she's like, oh, you want me to go in here and snag some people? Awesome, I got you. Because it's like, Alita's like, all right, we're going to do this, this, and this. Chromia, you got this? She's like, yeah, I got this. It's like, cool. I don't trust Bumblebee to do that. Chromia is my girl. So yeah, absolutely. I would love to have seen more Chromia.
I can agree.
Big agree, big agree.
Good question.
Okay, got any more questions, guys? Oh, one more in the
I
middle.
know I saw a hand here. And
I'll go in the middle first, and then...
You said about celebrities getting...
Yeah.
But you've got an action figure of one of your characters. How was that?
Yeah, I was like, I think I started to say this and then stopped myself earlier. You know, I was talking to a friend about this and I was like, you know what? If this is the only thing I'm ever known for in my career, I'm okay with that. I have an action figure, and that was like my bucket list. I was like, action figure, bucket list, baby. And it was amazing, and I would say I was sad that she was exclusive in the US at Walmart, and I believe I heard here she was an exclusive at a store as well. But man, she sold out instantly, and I was like, if nothing else, again, Earthspark's going to have Alita 1. I was like, if nothing else, we are showing with our pocketbooks to Hasbro, this is a character that they need to pay attention to. Yeah.
No, definitely.
Pardon? What?
Ruth picked up that Alita today.
Oh, yay! Good for you. I've seen them on eBay. I have seen them on eBay. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I think that's all
that
we've
it?
got time for today.
Thank
We
you.
need a little break for our